what I want to do is take the time and go over the component creation for the Unit 3 assignment. Basically, what I'm going to do is go over what we did previously, and then show how the code needs to be transitioned into a component. So the first thing that I want to do is show the actual page. And the actual page is my support plan, same as we've done throughout the semester, and it's being tied to this component in particular, the SQL data source component. Now this component is directly tied to the database, meaning there is no business component in between. It's not an end-tier design at this point. If we look at the source, you can see the connection string here and all of the information. Insert commands, delete commands, and so forth, as we finished with Unit 2 and the SQL commands that were required for Unit 2. Okay, if I look at the code, you'll notice that this has a couple of important things. Let's say I want to add a plan. When I hit add plan, it's going to perform the add. I think I'm looking at the wrong code though. Let's go back to here. Alright, btn add plan. See, okay, it's up here. So btn add plan is here. What this is doing is it's simply adding two parameters to the insert parameters called plan name and plan description. Again, this is the one that's directly tied to the graphical user interface. And then it's inserting it, calling a function, clearing the fields, and so forth. Same thing with update and delete. If we take a look at, for example, row command, it's trying to delete if the delete button is pressed. And so it's obtaining the ID that's attached to the selected row, and then passing the parameter needed, and then running the delete command based on the GUI control. Same thing for select. What we want to do now for the Unit 3, for the component base, is create a component that directly communicates with the database, and with that, oh, sorry, I accidentally pressed what I should, and with that, execute whatever commands or whatever assignments we want it to do. Okay. And for that, we have this. Okay. So in support plans, I added this. In support plans, I added this, the support plans.cs. It's a class. And in this class, what I did is I started creating the private variables that I need. So support plan ID, which stores the identity field, support plan name, and a description. And then I added something for extended error information, which is just going to be something that holds if an error occurs at any SQL command, at the running of any SQL command, it will store the details of that error on this. I created a few constructors. The first constructor is a blank constructor, and it obtains the connection string from the web.config file. This automatically accesses that web.config file, and it requires a parameter which is based on the name of the actual connection string. If you go to your web.config, you'll see that right here. This will be the name, and so it'll automatically use this connection string because this is the name that I have, and it's able to retrieve that from code. And so I have that. Therefore, if nothing is passed to the constructor, it'll use this default constructor using that connection string. Otherwise, I can pass it a specific connection string. This is just to make it more adaptable to any scenario. If I'm using a database that's outside of this, I don't have to recreate the entire code. I can just override the constructor and use that connection string, whatever is passed. Then I write public properties that provide access to those private variables. So support plan ID, support plan name, which is a string, and description, as well as extended error information. I have a method for clearing my fields, which are the private variables, and the execute SQL command. Execute SQL statement is a private one, meaning this is only used. It's only used internally through the support plan code. You can't use it from the support plan web page. You use it internally, and what it does is it creates a new command based on the connection. Set up the command type as text, the SQL, and then run and execute the non-query. If an error occurs, it will automatically set the extended error information. Okay, then I have another private member which loads data based on a past data row. We'll see this in a second where I pass the data row, and pretty much all it does is it loads those private variables that I use inside internal. And there I go. So because all of this is passed as a string, I have to convert it into a long so that it can be used here, because this is actually a long. And then the string ones are, no conversion is needed. Well, really, it's just using the toString function. Okay, and now for the public functions. I have a public function that all it does is just test to see if a connection is successful or not, if it's active. So it uses the connection string that's within the scope of this class, opens up a new SQL connection, opens and closes it. If nothing happens, it returns true, meaning everything's okay. Otherwise, it catches an error, loads the extended error information, and returns false. Then I can use a getAll function, also public. This fills a data set and returns a data set with every single piece of information that's included within the support plans table. And then it fills it. Here I have a typo. This should actually be called support plans. It should be the name. This fill for the data set using a data adapter. It basically uses the data set that's going to be filled, and then, as you can see here, the source table as a string. So the source table in this case is support plans. And if an error is caught, it sets up the extended error information. Then are my true public functions that are going to replace the previous code that where I was passing parameters. So instead of passing delete parameters, insert parameters, and select parameters, I'm actually running stuff here. So I pass it a support plan ID, that's the identity field, the auto increment, and I create an SQL command. Once I do this, I use the internal execute SQL statement that I previously showed. We can take a look at this now. It's that private method that all it does is it executes an SQL command, and so I'm calling it internally here. This is because multiple methods use the same SQL, need to execute an SQL statement, and so instead of writing the same code 3 times, I can just create a method and then call it in different times. And once again, if an error occurs, I load up the extended error information and return false. Then I have my add, and same thing. I generate an SQL based on the private variables that I have, so support plan name and description, and then I execute it. And I can also edit it. And so if support plan ID is 0, it means no find has ever occurred, and therefore there's nothing to update. Otherwise, it sets up the SQL command based again on those private variables, executes it, and then if an error occurs, once again, it'll load all this stuff. Okay, and here are my finds. These are public as well, and it'll return true or false based on if it found it. It asks for the identity field, the identity column, the auto increment, creates an SQL adapter with the created SQL query, sets up the data set, and returns the row. Well, it doesn't return the row; it loads the row here. Remember that load data row that I showed a few minutes ago? Well, there it is. It passes this row, it loads up the private variables, and then it returns true or false based on if it worked or not. So there it is, true or false. And again, if an error occurred, it sets that up. And that's pretty much it. What you guys would have to do is you could really use this class as the base class for what you're doing. You don't need to really recreate anything. What you would need to do is replace this stuff to fit your needs. So meaning modify my database information with your database information. So if you're using a table called customers, then this would be customers and customers ID and so forth. So really, you can reuse this code. It's just you need to understand what needs to change in order for you to adapt this code. But this class pretty much does everything that you need to do in terms of communicating with the database and communicating with the GUI. And if we look at the GUI now, which would be this one, ASPX.CS, you can take a look at some of the changes that occur. First, I have a save table. Well, let's take a look at this. So if I'm looking for add plan, for example, add plan now does this. If it's an edit, it's because of the session state, which is the same as Unit 2. This didn't change. Here's where the changes occur. Now I create an instance of my class and I save the members. How do I save the members? Well, I go in here and I pass the GUI information to the property members that load up the actual data in the instance of my class. Alright, let me get back to this. Okay, so I'm here. Then I can do an if plans.add, and remember this returns either true or false. So if it's false, remember when I loaded extended error information, well, here's where I would use it. Clear fields just resets the GUI, and that's pretty much it. If it's an edit, then I want to find based on the session state, and I create a new instance of my class. Find it. When I find it, now everything is loaded here. I save the members, same thing. I save the GUI information to the actual class, and then I perform an edit by actually calling the edit function. If it returns false, it means there's an error, and I deal with it with this, and then clear fields. So at the end, I call this data bind because I'm no longer binding it from the GUI as we did in Unit 2. I'm now binding it using my class as my business component. And so as you can see, it's fairly similar to the code that we did in Unit 2, but now instead of using the components, the GUI components, we're using business components that we created ourselves. And so really, all this is an adaptation to fit your needs into an existing code. You don't really need to recreate the entirety of the code. You can use mine as the basis of the code, but just make the necessary modifications so that you can use the functions and so that you can use the shell class. Alright, hopefully this helps. As always, if you need any assistance, please feel free to message me or email me or call me. Have a great day.